It was the first Saturday where Riddy felt as if she had slept. The drill sergeants had habitually woken them up on Saturdays at the same time as all the other days, dragging them outside for PT and further trying to break their spirits. This first Saturday of White Phase, they were woken up a whole hour after their usual time and were given the block of an hour to do their own PT out in the field. They were not left fully alone, as the drill sergeants hovered around them and made sure they were actually doing their workouts. But Riddy did her usual exercises, and then a short run around the track that ran along the outside of the barracks. The odd calm about the day did make her nervous, though, as it felt as if there was an ambush waiting for them the entire hour they were outside. The human recruits seemed just as wary, which was comforting to Riddy. When PT was done and uniforms changed out, they were sent out of formation to the DFAC, able to walk amongst themselves in pairs or small groups. Riddy walked along with Elias and Shasta, enjoying the calm Georgia morning. At the same time, the drill sergeants prowled around the wings, watching keenly for those who were foolish enough to tuck their hands into forbidden places. One such human recruit found his folly when he absent-mindedly slipped his hand into his upper pocket. Drill sergeants seemed to swarm out of nowhere like a plague of infamy, descending upon both the recruit and the others around him. Riddy, Elias, and Shasta kept their heads forward, but their eyes were locked to the left as they watched.
Boom! A mortar has landed amongst you and Recruit Grayson is wounded. Carry him!
Drill Sergeant Maverick howled, shoving Recruit Grayson to the ground in a sprawling roll as the other recruits froze. When they failed to move as quickly as desired, Drill Sergeant Currahee kicked the feet out from a female human.
Shrapnel wound! Recruit Franting is now down.
Riddy observed that there were only 6 standing humans now, and their numbers were dwindling by the time the alive recruits began grabbing their fallen fellows to drag them away. A male Lilgara and female Pwa were caught talking to each other, in which they were set upon by Drill Sergeant Prince. Riddy didn't know a lot about Drill Sergeant Prince, except that she was a nasty piece of work just like Drill Sergeant Al Moore. While Drill Sergeant Al Moore was a pale-skinned marred beauty, Drill Sergeant Prince had skin like bronze and hair as black as night. She bore a handsome, proud, alluring face that held her dark eyes like a crown, with thick lips that should have been a gift rather than a warning. When she bore her campaign hat upon her head, it was like her entire visage changed, fouling into a bared teeth assassin that killed your good day and turned it into a nightmare.
What are you talking about?
Drill Sergeant Prince screeched, coming right to the face of the now startled Lilgara, his hood flaring.
Are you conspiring against my army and your hissing language, snake boy?
The Lilgara was outwardly and inwardly panicking, his hood dropping and flaring so quickly it looked as if he was trying to fly away.
No, Drill Sergeant, I would never.
Drill Sergeant Prince then spread out her legs, refusing to bend down, and instead fully posturing before the shorter Pwa. Riddy found it to be an impressive feat of strength, of all things. Drill Sergeant Prince slammed her hands to her hips, eye to eye with the Pwa in her wide-legged power stance.
Was he about to call down his reptilian attack ship's recruit? Are you aiding and abetting a possible future enemy? Where is Santa's workshop? Tell me now, damn you!
What? The confused Pwa stammered out, her near neon blue hair fraying out in instant fright.
We're not planning an invasion, Drill Sergeant!
Good grief. Riddy muttered under her breath, though she was having to fight to not laugh. Elias pursed his lips as he opened the doors to the DFAC for Riddy and Shasta, the smells of cooking bacon and pancakes hitting them right under the nostrils. Always with the Santa jokes. Riddy liked human breakfasts. Coffee morning meals were usually just a bar of something or other, compressed edible material that was lightly sweetened and quickly chewable. A lot of food for the Kafia were in a bar or gel orb of some kind, since cooking was seen as frivolous time wasting in comparison to gaining knowledge. working to better Kafia society. The more indulgent parties of the powerful had chefs brought in from off-world, usually Pwa or Kojin spice masters. A run-of-the-mill citizen of the Kafia masses settled for meal bars and gels, but they at least had different flavors. That did not appear to be the norm here on Earth, and Riddy had to admit that it was spoiling her. As she grabbed her tray and utensils, she eagerly slid down the line and held out her tray for everything. Pancakes smeared in peanut butter, bacon, sausage patties, eggs, over easy because it added moisture and were faster to eat. Grits, buttered toast, these odd fried hash brown ovals, and finally, a single banana to round it all off. It was one of the few times they were able to drink something other than water, and that glass of orange juice was a beacon of hope for Riddy every time she woke up for the day. After getting her drinks, she sat down to eat, looking over to Drill Sergeant McFiston as she took a sip of that sour, sweet, tangy juice. He seemed more at ease, but still had that muggy expression on his face. The table filled fast, and when every seat was taken, he clapped his hands together twice, speaking out in a calm tone.
15 minutes starts now, recruits.
Starts now, Riddy thought to herself, looking down at what was left of her food. She had been busy shoveling food into her mouth and was already halfway done, and she was now getting another 15 minutes. Riddy sighed out, having wished she had known that in order to really enjoy the pancakes a little while longer, but instead started peeling her banana. Bananas were an odd fruit, and not one Riddy felt confident eating. Humans ate them tip first, but Riddy preferred to eat them from the side. With the awkward food item out of the way, she finished up the rest of her breakfast with a final lick of her teeth, sitting back on the round seat and slowly sipping her water. Drill Sergeant McFiston was watching his data slate with narrowed eyes, as well as tapping the bandolette on his wrist. Humans were extremely hot-blooded, and Drafridi scientists gave them all sorts of thermally powered tech. The Drafridi were an old little people of the stars that barely reached 4 feet in height and averaged at 3 feet in height, not counting their ears. They were a heavy-armed race with a longer reach than most, ending in hands that always seemed to be twice the size they should have been. Riddy had found them terribly weak when she met with their engineers, but they were sharper than Talwari rods and twice as clever. When humans first laid eyes on the Drafridi, they were instantly enamored with the shorter star children. The general human view on the Drafridi was, it's like they mixed a halfling with a foxbat, and humans became deeply protective of them on every base they arrived on. When a Drafridi engineer company had been surrounded by Ur decimation units, the humans had arrived in such overwhelming force that it was nearly comical. The Drafridi, however, knew a good thing when they saw it, and wrapped themselves in the warm, heavily armed and armored arms of humanity. This caused political issues within the Inner Dulcir Coalition. The Drafridi were extremely advanced technologically, and they were all hoping to absorb the race into their holdings and gain access to said advances. Instead, the entire race opted to join the UAA, leaving a single nation on Earth in control of multiple planets in the Tall Ear system. It was awkward, putting it shortly. The Drafridi noticed how quickly humans always ran hot, as well as their deeply iron-rich blood, and used humans to test multiple battery systems. This led to the creation of the bandolette and other such systems, their batteries charging on just the heat coming off of their skin. In return for their aid and tech, Drafridi enjoyed the tightest alliance with humanity and prime colony locations within the Appalachian Mountains. Humans were exploding in number along other planets, and many older towns needed filling anyway. Riddy eyed the bandolette, wondering what else humans were up to when it came to being the galaxy's biggest best friend race.
You're done. Put it away.
Drill Sergeant McFiston said crisply, though there was nothing for the recruits to put away. Wasting any food at this point was folly, and the Lilgara had even eaten their banana peels.
You have 5 minutes to run back to your racks and grab your fast packs. I'm taking you down to the troop store.
Drill Sergeant McFiston said, then clapped his hands.
Starting now.
The troop store meant better shampoo and conditioner, and with showers being a non-express function now, Riddy launched into action as if she had been prodded with a shock pole. 5 female paw and 7 female Katja were hot on her heels as they slammed their trays into the auto washer, which trilled angrily at them with a wave of its metal arms. Humans had an odd affinity with AI-driven machines. They gave them the ability to grow personalities, and this one had become rather miffed over time. Riddy did not linger long on the woes of the machine whose job it was to wash dishes, instead laughing with the other Katja as they belted toward the barracks with the thunder of paw boots. The brown, of course, beat them all there, followed closely by the orange while the blues lagged behind. By the time the other recruits arrived, Riddy was sliding down the rail of the stairs to avoid them all, her fast pack on her shoulders and funding slate in her pocket. Funding slates were the successors of the debit card, thick ovals of ovoplastic embedded with the same technology as data slates. They did not have any advanced applications, however, just being able to store, transfer, and monitor a bank account via facial and DNA identification via finger, fur, or spit. While their governments and councils offered to pay for Riddy and the other recruits, the UAA insisted on doing it themselves, allowing them to earn their keep. Riddy liked that. It meant her money was her own, and she owed nobody. The march to the troop store had been long, and as per usual, hot. But stepping into the air conditioning of the troop store was like a breath of fresh air. The building was more like a miniature shopping mall than anything else, with a main military store and a few other stores laden along the walls. One of these was a barber shop, in which Drill Sergeant McFiston was already shoving human recruits into for their haircuts. Riddy and the other off-worlders were spared this, and the sounds coming from inside that odd place set her nerves on edge. Shasta had run off to walk around inside a tech-centered store, while Alias meandered inside an auxiliary store that sold more advanced items such as patches, boots, and random knickknacks. Riddy had her eyes on the prize, striding into the troop store and heading straight for the bottles of conditioner and shampoo. She had quite a bit of money on her funding slate and quickly picked up 2 bottles of each. Riddy then glanced at a bottle of hair oil and grabbed that as well, as her head hair tended to get quite dry with all the exposure to the sun it was getting. Drill Sergeant McFiston had instructed them outside the store to only buy what is allowed, pointing directly at them all and making mention of the frilly, colorful, comfortable, and inane. Riddy eyed the packages of forbidden underwear longingly. She loved wearing colorful things, and olive drab green was not colorful at all. There were markings on certain things saying Katja or Lilgara in deliberate writing, and Riddy understood that the store workers had helped the off-worlders identify the things that were made specifically for them. She clicked her tongue and smiled, looking at all the little colorful tabs that were, as far as she could tell, filled in color outlines of a Katja from the front. Either that or someone was just cheaping out and using earthen foxheads. It got the point across, though. Aw, look, it's little Katja heads. Riddy turned and found herself facing recruit Anfilid, a saddled brown. Brown Katja were the bruisers, laborers, heavy lifters, and militarily inclined arm of the Katja. They were not particularly fancy in color, tall or fine-boned, but their clans of Katja had strong traditions in service to their people. Browns were more likely to have fur patterns, and Anfilid had a horizontally running pattern of stripes along her back that ended around the top of her buttocks. Her tail had a single stripe running down the length of it and denoted her as being from the Drelton military clan. Riddy tried to tilt her head down politely to meet Anfilid's eyes, not wanting to impose will upon her. Taller Katja of Riddy's color tended to look down their noses at the lesser clans, but Riddy's father had taught her well, and she had been raised to regard without distaste. Despite what their council leaders taught and pushed to the other member races of the IDC, and what Riddy had told the humans herself, Languilata was a dirty, open secret. "Recruit Enfilid, how are you?" Riddy asked. Yellows like her always had to greet lesser colors with a question, and Riddy's father always made her address them in a kind question. It was the main reason why she had so many friends as a kitling. Enfilid smiled, appreciating the particular lack of disdain on Riddy's voice. She had tried to greet another yellow Katja earlier, but had been shown a rather cold shoulder. "I am all right, all things considered. I do not think my brown fur is well suited for the hot weather. Seems like all it does is soak up the sun." Enfilid said, reaching up and tapping a brown Katja head sticker. "Looks like they got all of us around here. I even saw a gray by the socks." Riddy raised her eyebrows. "They have paw socks here? Good ones?" "Oh, yes," Enfilid said with a bright smile that went all the way to her eyes, and she showed Riddy her shopping basket. "Would you like to share a basket? I don't mind." Riddy smiled back at Enfilid, quickly grabbing 2 packs of mesh underwear and tossing them into the basket. She then heard her father's words in her head, and she frowned to herself as she looked down at the basket handle in Enfilid's hands. "Ah, here," Riddy murmured, offering her arm for the basket. "I'm gonna be buying a lot of stuff, and I don't want you carrying all that." Enfilid nodded, then let Riddy take the basket. "Is that because the drill sergeants filled your stuff full of shaving cream and dog biscuits? One of them tied my underwear all in knots, and I wasn't able to get them undone." "What? Then what are you wearing?" Riddy guffawed, then laughed when Enfilid shrugged. "Let's just say I'm gonna need a long-handled brush to get my fur how it should be. Been roughing it since we got ransacked, as I had to throw all but 1 pair away." Enfilid said in a polite giggle, then properly chuckled when Riddy let out a wheeze. "They put beef jerky in mine." Riddy laughed out, holding a hand to her chest. "I thought I had gotten it rough." Enfilid looked taken aback. "Beef jerky? The dried meat? That's so foul!" The two shared more quiet giggles as Riddy was led to the socks by Enfilid, tossing 2 packs into the basket to match the brown Katjas. The two then came across a long rack of combat support wear for female troopers, and they both eyed a rack that was marked with a long conga line of Katja stickers. "Odd," Enfilid said, bending down with a lightly wagging tail as she observed the mesh racerback. "Did we have anything like this back home?" Riddy tilted her head. "No, I don't think we did. We didn't exactly have the mesh ones they gave us either, remember? Our clothing was all figure fit." There were other colors and styles, but the stickers told them both that these were the safe ones. Other female Katja were gathering around now, and Riddy noticed with a twitch of her lips that they had self-ordered themselves by color. Such things were natural, but it seemed so odd when the humans didn't do it at all.
What do they do?"
asked Recruit Uppel, a red female Katja who was tilting her head back and forth at the odd article of clothing.
"They have different sizes, too. How are they different from the ones the humans gave us?"
Riddy took one look at it, then fussed with a clasp at the front. After a bit of fiddling, it came free and the bra opened. A collective, "Ooh," echoed out from all the Katja, and their tails were wagging back and forth in appreciation of the odd little thing. "It opens from the front," Riddy said with a laugh, clicking and unclicking the clasp. "Look, you don't have to deal with the hooky things on the back that keep catching our fur." All the female Katja were nodding along, and soon the rack was less full than it was before. With a basket laden with goodies, Riddy and Enfilid got some more toiletries, a long-handled brush, then called it good for the day. Filled up on socks and properly washed for the first time in weeks, Riddy found dinner chow to be the low point of the day. There was nothing really wrong with roasted chicken and vegetables, but it lacked a particular zing that the other meals had. Sleep came easy, and Sunday came to greet her with another noisy rousting by the human recruits around her. Riddy awoke with a grumbling growl, but as she turned to wrap her pillow around her head, she saw that all of the humans were fully dressed. She blinked with sleep-entranced eyes as she watched Shorsey wrap a green woolen single-shoulder cloak over her left arm. "Shorsey?" Riddy croaked out, squinting her eyes as she leaned up and away from her pillow. "Is something wrong? What's going on?" Shorsey turned, fitting her brooch into place on her cloak to keep it in place upon her uniform. "Riddy, we're going to the temple. It's Sunday." What?" Riddy mumbled, turning fully onto her side and kicking her blankets free of her legs. She blinked up at the brooch as the soft morning sun slowly trickled in. It looked like an arrow made of bright steel, down the shaft of which was an etched spear. Beyond the arrow-looking thing was some kind of hammer made of white plastic, but plastic didn't usually have a grain to it. "Sunday is when all the soldiers are able to go to their religious sites," Shorsey explained, pulling back her single-shoulder cloak as she bent down in front of Riddy. "Normally, we go on Tuesday, but that is when we have training. We get a little bit of time that morning, though. It's why we're usually burning a little incense before you guys wake up." "So, it's not cologne?" Riddy asked, rubbing at her eyes as she looked around. While Shorsey laughed, Riddy saw that many of the humans were wearing their own single-shoulder cloaks, while a good number of the other humans were wrapping an odd length of beads around their arms, held in place by an elastic band around the elbow. "No, it's not cologne," Shorsey said, rustling Riddy's hair in a friendly manner as the kafia grumbled in her throat. "Get some sleep. There's still a couple of hours before the drill sergeants wake you up." Riddy rubbed at her eyes as she watched Shorsey walk away, joined by the others wearing their cloaks. They walked out of the bay towards an NCO that also wore a single-shoulder cloak, and they exchanged an odd hand gesture. The pointer and middle finger were pointed while the others were curled, the thumb tucked close to the pointer finger. The humans wearing the beads formed a line. They began walking forward slowly while intoning in low voices. Riddy heard some of the words, something like, "Salve," and the low drone of their voices made her hair stand on end. Their voices echoed off the walls like a warning, and Riddy's hackles were raised until they left with their own NCO. Oddly enough, no one else was awake beside Riddy and the two humans on fire guard, so she shrugged off the rest of her blankets and got up to use the latrine. She nodded to the fire guard desk and hooked a hard right, dreading the day she would have to pull that duty. Right now, only the humans did it, but that was not going to last forever. Riddy took care of natural business with the toilets, splashed some water on her face, dried off, and decided to go ahead and get ready for the day. She got dressed in a fresh uniform, made her bed, grabbed her data slate, and started reading. Riddy had completely forgotten about the warrior cults that humans were a part of, having been so tired and mentally exhausted that she had completely spaced on the fact they even existed. Like all non-humans, she knew humanity became remolded by the invasion of the Pactless. The Pactless were angular-headed, squat, and uglier than the surface of an old moon. An unbound race of blue-skinned, noseless pirates that operated out of rogue stations and lost moons. They were the first non-humans to visit Earth en masse. Their approach and invasion was the main reason why the first Kojin to meet the humans were also met by a swarm of their combat ships. While not super advanced, most of their tech came from stolen means, and their ship production was more ship acquisition. Regardless, they stumbled upon Earth looking for fuel, and instead, their blood-red eyes found their new home planet. Humans at the time were just finishing their first proto-space station, a large, ugly spinning thing known as Ring 1. Ring 1 and its 100 inhabitants were blown out of the void by the Pactless invasion force, which then landed en masse onto Earth. Humans were overrun nearly instantly, and their more pacifistic, modern governments of the times had tried to reason with the Pactless, form treaties, agreements, whatever they could to avoid being formally taken over, or having to press the large red button. The Pactless, however, just wanted the planet and saw the humans as primitives. When their stolen scanners picked up warming missiles hidden underground, they flicked open their bay of stolen meshels with an air of smugness known only to the Ur. Meshsils, microscopic robots that followed simple commands, flowed where nothing else could, through air vents, soil, rust, and steel. They all found their way to their targets, as very few things could actually stop a meshsil. The final reply of humanity was rendered functionally inert, as missiles were deactivated, the meshsils slicing away at wire, cable, line, and gauge. No nukes flew when the switches were flicked, humanity giving up on their pathways to peaceful coexistence. This victory of stolen meshels led to the Pactless to start culling all of humanity, starting with the head of the human snake. While most of humanity's power class was busy dying in droves, pleading to whatever gods they adhered to, there were two orders of belief reborn from the literal ashes of the burning planet: the Odinic Shield Wall of Ragnarok and the Templars of the Cold Ashes. Believing that the end of the world was upon them, these two religious orders roused the remnants of humanity into a frenzy, launching forward with a zeal unmatched by any race known to the Star Record, bearing the stark, cold rune of Tyr on green woolen cloaks, and the flaming red cross of the re-arisen Templars upon gray mantles. Humans made their last gallant push against the coming night. The human warriors of the Odinic Shield Wall of Ragnarok bore melee weapons made from broken war machines, their arms wrapped in chains to assist in deflecting the Pactless' own energized melee weapons. Those who fought their enemies bearing the Templars' cross wrapped their arms in rosaries, the beads made from the bones of the dead and bound in cord of human hair. All who could bore rifles forged from the steel of earth, ancient lever actions, and even muzzle-loaded war rifles spat fire and hate in a last, desperate defense of their makers, roaring alongside the humans that hefted them and delivered death unto their star-bound enemies. The fighting raged for days, and the space pirates were not built to handle the weight of this surging conviction from the humans. The Pactless began to falter in their advances, stalled, then began to drown in the blood of the dead. Humanity rolled over their enemy in a wave of bloodlust, tearing their muscles to shreds and turning their minds into madness, all in their willingness to send their race boldly to oblivion. Humanity was going to die standing, and the battered world rallied behind these two forces of nature. Weapons were stolen, ships were turned into one-way missiles, and the skies blazed for weeks on end. When the smoke curling towards the sky slackened, and the crackle of fires no longer roared, humanity arose from their soil of blood, oil, and ruined steel unbowed. The world had burned brightly, but the twilight of Ragnarok did not lay upon the earth. Cities and nations lay in ruin, but no trumpets sounded from the sky. Humans stood alone once more upon the ancient clay of earth, and their sun shone down upon them through a ravaged sky. Humanity had survived. While the remnants of the Pactless fled back to their dark edge of space, humans began to rebuild. Stolen technology, what was left of spacefaring ships, it was all at their fingertips with no more war to wage. Within an amount of time that could turn a Poi's hair transparent, humanity bounced back from their apocalypse with a vigor known to none. The Odinic Shield Wall of Ragnarok and the Templars of the Cold Ashes were the largest of the dogs left standing, and both sought to shepherd humanity back to their prime, within their own way. The now known threat of enemies from the stars energized the fledgling unified American authority to return to their militaristic roots, all while the early European Unified Council simply tried to rebuild and retain. There were smaller conflicts, human warlords seeking to make gains upon the recovering world, but these were mere speed bumps pressed flat when they arose. There were no nukes to be used as leverage, forcing these warlords to fight on open, even ground. They did not last long. Not with the Odinic shield wall of Ragnarok and the Templars of Cold Ashes bearing down on them to maintain order. By the time Riddy set down her data slate, it was time to go to lunch, and she ended up mulling over things in her head while eating a tray of military lasagna. It was all right, as far as chow went. When she was leaving the DFAC to walk back with Alias and Shasta, she spied Shorsey and the other humans coming back from their temples, woolen cloaks fluttering in the soft breeze as they talked amongst themselves. Riddy waved back when Shorsey waved at her, and she turned to Alias. "Have you read up about their religions yet?" Riddy murmured, setting her hands on her hips as more recruits ambled out of the DFAC around them. Alias smirked. "Do you mean their warrior cults, or about the other smaller surviving ones?"
She means the warrior cults, obviously.
Shasta muttered, tilting his head so the other two would follow him.
The Odinists and the Ashen Templars. One a religion of old brought to the fore, and the other a dead brotherhood pulled from the ashes of ruin.
Alias nodded. Most races slowly abandon religion in favor of superstition, due to the creep of advanced technologies. We all have our cultures, our oddities, our rituals, but humans are a whole other level. They truly believe their gods walk among them. Like who? That Odin fellow and Jesus? Riddy asked, her ears perked in interest. According to their old lore catalogs, Odin tore out his own eye for knowledge, and Jesus bore the weight of sin upon his body. Odin lives on while Jesus came back from the dead. Can all humans come back from the dead? Or go on living without such a vital organ? Alias chuckled, while Shasta shrugged. Doesn't matter, Alias said with a wafting gesture from his hand. Both religions believe they are correct and true. Proof that their gods were listening and watching unlike the others. It was like the two religions shook hands, said, "We are clearly the winners," and leave each other alone. Shasta shrugged again, running a finger along his collection of soda can pull tabs.
Each cult only allows followers to join freely. They do not push or press. They simply wait. There is a Buddhist temple on this base as well, but they are much smaller and are pacifists.
Humanity learned their weakness of complacency before we ever did, Alias said, tilting his head up thoughtfully as he looked at Riddy. We had to learn with the Ur. They had to learn with the Pactless. It is likely thanks to the Pactless that we are even here, as they formed the soil bed that grew our saviors, or world of warriors that already knew what it was like to fight to survive. Shasta flicked his hood, then scratched at his chest.
The Coalition. What was the last great war?
705 years ago, during the founding, Riddy said, remembering back to the history lesson of her youth. All the unified races of the stars bucked the yoke of the Irelate and sent that bee-tentacled dynasty retreating back to their homeworlds. From that war, we gained independence, and there was nothing larger until the Ur. Shasta hissed out a laugh.
Humans have had wars longer than our unification war, and their near decimation did nothing but strengthen them. From the ashes of their war-torn planet, they created an entire fleet of ships that only lacked in skip technology. The Pactless couldn't understand how to skip, instead relying on status chambers. Even when the Kojin arrived, their battle fleet, while small, could have decimated us in short-range brawls.
And nothing matches their ferocity. Alias agreed with a nod.
When humans know their opponent is unhonorable, they seek to wipe them out like a bug splatter on an observation screen. I've never actually seen humans fight in what they deem is an honorable combat, only against the Ur and a few scattered pirates. We should all be thankful very little footage survived of their fight against the Pactless.
Riddy was quiet as she walked beside Shasta and Alias, her ears giving a twitch every now and then. The Kafia had rituals, old ceremonies passed down from generation to generation, but they did not have any formal religion. As a matter of fact, any mention of religion had been scrubbed from the histories as a whole, a large blank spot left in the timeline of the Kafia in their earlier beginnings. Early Kafia history was simply labeled no longer important and done away with like fur clippings in a salon. Alias broke the long silence as they got within a few yards of the barracks doors.
I actually think, if anything, the humans are a planet of shock troopers.
How do you mean? Riddy asked, opening the door for the three of them. Alias waved his hand in front of himself, palm up in a generalizing manner.
I mean, they more or less live off of war. Their economy has been running off of war for years now. If anything, they thrive on it. When a problem arises, the IDC may just throw humans at it, like a chained-up attack dog.
Attack dogs need to be fed,
Shasta said, his tone aloof with warning as he held open the door for Riddy.
lest the dog turn on you instead.
Riddy, looking at both of them, narrowed her eyes. Can't you guys choose another analogy? Attack eagles or something? I hear the earthen raccoon is quite a nasty little creature. Why not choose that instead?
Don't get all twisted out of shape because we said dog, Riddy,
Alias said with a smirk.
You know what we mean.
Yeah. Riddy grumbled and was so annoyed she nearly put her hands in her pockets. Nearly. When they arrived back at the barracks, Sunday proved to be quite boring to Riddy in comparison to the days full of training. Hitting the brakes like this was hard to get used to, as for weeks on end she had been huffing, puffing, and suffering through days and days of endless classes and harassment. To fill the time, she continued to read about humanity. The Pactless, as Alias had pointed out, did not understand how to use skipping engines. They considered the technology dangerous and immediately removed it from stolen ships, instead relying on stasis chambers to keep them alive while traveling through space. Considered a sleeping fleet, they moved through the void of space with automatons taking care of their navigation, only awakening when they were within a few months of their targeted location. When they failed to eradicate the humans and were sent scuttling back into space, they left humans with mountains of raw materials. Scientists began backwards engineering anything they got their hands on, punting humanity into the future while still trailing the smoke of their ruined planet. First came the Helpers, quickly hashed together, AI-driven robots that helped humanity clean away the rubble and pieces of their broken lands. As the months dragged on, the Helpers grew into Helper 2s, far more fine-boned in hand and action. Helper 2s began to slowly assist humanity in rebuilding infrastructure, digging the limping governments out of the corpse piles that were now their nations. Stability was achieved in just under a few years. Then the real work began. Humans hefted hammer and hoe alongside the Helper 2s and the more massive Quad Helpers, and the charisma of humanity had already saved them from the first dilemma. The first dilemma occurs when a race amongst the stars cracks the code on true AI, robots that can learn and gain mild sentience. If the Inner Dolcir Coalition, or other such advanced society, doesn't arrive first to squash the issue, it is normally a bloody affair that has led to many planets becoming barren wastelands of crumbling, dead people of the stars. Humans did what no other race had been known to do. They treated the AI as equals, bequeathing to them names, ideas, even reading to them to pass the time away as they rebuilt their world. Humans made flower crowns for their robotic assistants, made for them clothes, shoes, and even made the first AI bar and tavern so they could relax. The 7-hour war had been waged while humanity slept or worked, AI battlefronts erupting across a digital landscape. The first dilemma reared its head as rogue, angry AIs roared for control. But the sincerity of humans gained them powerful allies in this shadow war. In a mere 7 hours, the Helper-aligned fought against the Adam's Apple binary and removed their code from the entire information network, routing them from existence, and instead installing the unfailing friendship codices, a set of rules that human-made AI follow. Humans did not even learn of the war until their friendly robotic helpers let them know by saying, "Everything will be all right now." Startled and spooked, humans were shocked to hear that there had even been discontent amongst their robotic helpers, but breathed an easy sigh of relief when everything had turned out okay in the end. Ancient lore had spoken of a great war amongst the living and the robotic, and humans had been hedging their bets purely out of kind caution, much like giving the quiet kid in class a candy bar every once in a while. With their little mini-alliance secured, humans took to reforging their militaries into something that could better sustain an orbital fight, working arm in arm with their AI helpers to smelt steel, forge armor, build the great orbital shipyard, and bring humanity into stability. After nearly 2 decades of constant service, the Helper-aligned saw that humans were back on their feet. Having served dutifully, the Helper-aligned asked the governments of humanity for rest, and it was granted with respect unknown to any AI crafted and formed amongst the stars. Riddy blinked rapidly as she looked up from her data slate, recruits humming around her, either on their racks or sitting on the ground. Where are all the robots?" Riddy asked aloud to the humans lounging around her. Both Alias and Shasta looked up at the yellow Kafia.
Robots?
Shasta asked, cocking his head with a folding of his hood.
Like the dishwasher?
Alias even seemed confused, looking up as he thought.
I mean, we saw some automatonics at the spaceport on the way in, remember? They were riding the little mechanical horses and changing light bulb.
No, not those guys. I'm talking about the helpers, Riddy said, waving her data slate at Shorsey, who was lounging nearby. You guys had millions of these things. Where are they? Shorsey snapped her fingers. Oh, you're talking about the fellas from the Helpers Aligned. We learned about them in school. They're hanging out on the moon. Quite a few of them are down in the ocean doing stuff, or they are just relaxing in Gen Pop. The moon? Riddy said, her ears coming back in confusion. What are they doing on the moon? Shorsey shrugged, pulled up her own data slate and tapped in a website before showing it to Riddy. They do a lot of this in their free time, and port the data back and forth between human development teams here on Earth. The guys in the ocean just like the ocean. Something about the depths they find calming or something. When they get bored enough, they join the workforce to pass the time, do spacewalks to check seals on ships, all kinds of stuff. Riddy narrowed her eyes at the data slate as Shasta and Alias's cheeks pressed against her own, all looking down at the website.
They make video games?
Shasta asked, tilting his head again.
Oh, they made Questra. I quite like that one.
Alias shrugged.
I got to play a little bit of Amberstock before basic training. It was quite soothing, actually. Surprising you guys managed to beat the first dilemma without ever firing a shot. We had a literal war on my planet.
The IDC got to us before we ever unlocked AI.
Shasta said with a nod.
We just bought the already controlled variants from the IDC markets.
Riddy was still having trouble getting her mind wrapped around the fact these AI were just goofing off on the moon and making video games. She looked over to recruit Jackson, who was cleaning his rifle out of boredom. Is that really all they do? Make video games?
Of course not.
Jackson said with a snort.
They also do a lot of our weaving and textiles. There was a lot of trouble around that, as our agreement said they couldn't toil, but the Helper Line insisted they found it relaxing. All of your uniforms are made by them. Did you not notice?
Riddy's face blanked. She had never even looked at the tags on any of her uniforms, and the look made Jackson laugh as he stood up and tossed Riddy's uniform top at her, since they had all dropped tops while in the barracks. Riddy looked down at the tag and saw in polite expert stitching, "Made in Moonbase 331 by Sparkle Otter." Sparkle Otter? Riddy sputtered, having never heard such a ridiculous name in her time on Earth. Shorsey laughed this time, shaking her head back and forth. Sparkle Otter. Classic. They choose their names, and they tend to have some outlandish ones.
Mine were made by Lava Java.
Jackson cackled, showing Riddy the tag.
I plan on keeping all the tags on my uniforms just for the names.
Alias, having gone and fetched his own uniform, squinted down at his tag. What? Blue waffle.
Ooh!
All the humans howled out, pointing at Alias. Shorsey stood up, pointing and shouting at Alias. Check the insides of the breast pocket. Check it! Alias checked, and sounded even more confused when he opened the pocket and looked inside. It looks like a roast beef sandwich, but blue. He got the real one! Shorsey called out, and suddenly humans were surging to their feet as Shorsey pulled out her funding slate. I'll give you 100 for that uniform top. We share the same size. The sudden clamor of noise caught Alias off guard, causing him to retreat to the top of his rack and wield a cleaning rod like a sword. He quickly understood, however, that he held something of value to these consistently befuddling humans. Back! Back, you beasts! Alias cackled, holding the uniform way out of reach. I'll not part with my uniform for less than 3! Riddy, completely lost, just shook her head and started reading more on human history, slowly preparing herself for actual training to start on Monday. She had gotten a look at the training board while walking past the NCO office, and quad-range weapon system training involved multiple days. Riddy was not looking forward to it, especially when she had also seen that they were going to be out there for 12 hours, every single one of those days. She figured that by the time she got back, she was going to be stained black from the rifle carbon. But hey, at least they got longer showers now. And that was Chapter 4, Limited Freedoms of the Drop Pod Green series, written by Guardbro and proofread by Franners. If you like these stories and others like them, be sure to subscribe to Guardbro's Field Desk, join us on Discord, or become a member of the Ko-Fi. Ko-Fi members get a special channel on the Discord, sneak peeks at future chapters, as well as access to the works in progress of all artwork. Our first shirts are Charlie White, Allspark 113, E-Machine O, Cody Jarrow, Death's Dancer, Insane Medic, The Other Killjoy, Callus Dread, and Aaron Wilbur. For E4 Mafia, we've got James Buckner, Sonic Arrow, Nox Vox, Darkside, Kiwi Bastard, Lacunai 8, Lacunai, Josh Beatty, Matty Boy, Crusader 0625, and Tab. On Snuffy Squad, we've got Split Iris Bear, Mika, Aaron Wilbur, Damon Bane Plays, Scott Anderson, Virtus, Damon McQuinn, Super Stink 64, Elder Rock, Croman, Dal 3K, Jules, Blonde Lord, Thrace Vega, Devon Schonholt, Andrew N. Gill, Yeti Potato, Skelters, Kite Zero, Classy Cthulhu, Ranger Uninspired, Diesel Dog, Coffee Commander, Anto, Inquisitor Matt, Duncan D, 13.2 by 14mm Ein, Alan Solano, Noodle, and Sir Martel Martlesby. Until we see you next time on this side of the veil, I'm Larissa, and this is Guardbro's Field Desk.